candidate, but as governor, I do have a cheat code. I can simply look to California, Illinois, New York, and then do the opposite of what they're doing. And it usually works out pretty good. So we've got a lot of people that want to come, and that's fine. But we also want to make sure that we're doing what we can to preserve an important part of Florida's heritage. You know, we even did something last year on this lab-grown meat. And, you know, people said, oh, well, let people, you know, choose to do lab-grown meat. And some people said it may not be good for you, it may not be safe, we don't know yet. But that really wasn't the reason why I signed the bill. The reason why I signed the bill is that this lab-grown meat is part of a larger agenda. People like the World Economic Forum, others, they view agriculture as the problem for global warming. They view cattle as the problem for global warming. And so it's not that they just want to give consumers a choice with this. Their goal in pursuing this is to basically drive the cattle industry out of business. And that's not going to happen today. If we had not done the bill, it wouldn't have happened today. It may not happen next week, next year, but that is the goal. So we can sit there and just act like that's not the case, or we can nip it in the bud. So we chose to just nip it in the bud. I'm not playing the games of the World Economic Forum. I want to make sure that we preserve the cattle industry, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout the entire United States of America. And that was one part of a battle that we fought that wasn't limited to agriculture, but had a huge impact, and that's this whole idea of so-called ESG, environment, social governance. We launched a frontal assault against this in Florida many years ago. See, now it's fallen out of favor. At the time, it was like the thing to do. You have these massive companies falling all over themselves to try to do ESG scores. What's this? What's that? And part of the ESG was they really wanted to kneecap the way farmers did their jobs. A lot of the things that go in to modern agriculture, they did not want to even allow that to happen. That was their ultimate vision with some of the ESG stuff. And so, and it went just beyond agriculture. It went into a whole bunch of other things where big corporate financial institutions had to have like DEI policies. You had to have all this other stuff. And you know, some people said, well, ESG, it's private sector, let them do what they want. The problem is these weren't just business decisions. They were trying to change our society. They were trying to change policy, basically, without ever having to get elected to anything, without ever having to go through the process and actually do that. They just wanted to kind of collude together, asset managers, big companies, all that, and impose this worldview through the sheer force of their economic power, and that was unacceptable. So we stood up against it in our pension fund and all across all avenues that we could, when it really wasn't popular to do so, when we were going up against some pretty powerful institutions. But I can tell you today, the number one reason why you don't hear as much about ESG is because Florida was really the one responsible for killing ESG when we took our stand. In fact, you know, the head of BlackRock was, you know, he was kind of the visionary behind it, and then he was asked like last year, like, well, you know, ESG's kind of fallen apart. So you got guys like Governor DeSantis, they've made it toxic because they're always out there come criticize. But it's true, we really led the charge on that. That had huge impact for our society, but it definitely had major, major ramifications for our agriculture community. And so I was glad to not only lead those efforts, but have a lot of support for folks in the Florida legislature at the time. And we got it right in Florida, and other states have followed. And now, under the Trump administration, people don't even talk about ESG anymore because the tide has shifted. Another thing we've led on, and some other states are following, but we need more. We also need to see the federal government do something similar, is we passed historic legislation to protect agriculture lands from the encroachment of the Chinese Communist Party. I don't want China owning farmland in the state of Florida or anywhere in the United States for that matter. It's too important to our sustainability as a people, as a country, to allow a hostile Communist Party to take control of this. And, you know, when they buy it, it's not going to say the Chinese Communist Party buys this. No, I mean, these are front groups and all this other stuff. And we've done a good job on that legislation to really police that. So we were probably the first state. You know, on all these things, usually we're the first, but if we're not the first, it's like we're like second or third, and it's just because some other states have earlier legislative sessions than we do sometimes. But we were definitely leading the charge on that, and we've done that. And so that is something, and it's not just farmland. That's something that's important. It's by any land near critical infrastructure. Our military bases. Why do we want the Chinese Communist Party to be buying land near our military bases, or utilities and plants, power plants? Of course we don't want to do that. So I'm glad that Florida was able to lead on that. Now it brings us here today. SB 700 is the farm bill for the state of Florida. It does a lot of things that I think a lot of people are really going to be happy about. One, and we've already did an event on this, you know, you've had this debate, and really Florida's led on this too, partially because our Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, has really led the charge by going to counties and saying forcing fluoride into your water is actually not good. There's risks associated with that for pregnant women, for young people, for kids, and yes, use fluoride for your teeth, that's fine, but forcing it into the water supply is basically forced medication on people. They don't have a choice. You're taking that away from them. And so he really led, you had a lot of county governments, including Miami-Dade, that were saying we're not going to force the fluoride into the water. People want to use it on their teeth, great, you know, but it's readily available now. And so that led to this being put in the Farm Bill to say, you know, that local governments cannot engage in this fluoride forced medication. So the counties that did it are great, but now that's going to apply statewide once we sign the bill and it formally goes into effect. And it raises a larger issue about, and I think we saw a lot of this with COVID, that we had to fight back against. They had certain views. You know, you should wear a mask when you're outside in 95-degree temperatures. No, thank you, but that's what they were saying. They were saying that kids should get a COVID mRNA shot, even though we still don't have data to this day to justify doing that. And so they tried to push a lot of policies on people. And I think what it is I think some of these people, they think that they know better for you than you do for yourself. They think because they have medical training or they have this, that they should just be able to decree how we live our lives. And that proved disastrous during COVID. I mean, a lot of the things they were advocating not only didn't work, they caused a lot of harm. I mean, just think, when we made sure that the schools were open, I got sued by the teachers union saying close the schools. We had all these people. Fauci was saying this is irresponsible and all this stuff. They'd have had these kids locked out for a year and a half. It was up to them. So we fought back against it. And I think this fluoride is a good example, because what they're basically saying is they're ignoring any studies that have shown that there could be issues if you're overexposed to this, particularly for pregnant women and for kids. But they say, well, it's good for your teeth, so we should just force it. And you shouldn't have a choice in that. We certainly now, in our society in 2025, we have the ability to deliver fluoride through toothpaste and mouth and all these other things. You don't got to force it and take away people's choices. But the whole crux of the issue is you should be able to make decisions on the basis of informed consent. So you should be able to take information. You should be able to talk to folks, your doctor, your friends, your family, whatever, on any of these issues, and then make an honest judgment about what you think's best for you and your family. Forcing this in the water supply is trying to take that away from people who may want to make a different decision rather than to have this in water. And honestly, this is a much bigger issue. I mean, the fluoride is kind of one touch point, but it's a much larger issue